Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Albena, and I'm the program manager of the Microsoft Reactor. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I would like to quickly review two items with you, our code of conduct and event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. I will be sharing the link in the chat for our YouTube channel, and if you have not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please know that you must create an account on YouTube in order to access and interact in the chat. You can set that up right now, and if you're unable to use the chat but have questions, please feel free to reach out to us through social media or Meetup. Which brings us to today's session, the Serverless Project that got me promoted. This session will run approximately 16 minutes, and I'm going to bring our speaker for today, Gwen, which she is a Microsoft Cloud developer. Hi, Gwen.
Hi, Albina. Thank you so much for the introduction and welcome everyone. Let's settle in. Let's tell me in the chat where you're checking in from. What's your experience with serverless? But yes, like Albina mentioned, my name is Gwen, cloud developer advocate here at Microsoft. I primarily focus on .NET and serverless, which is why I am the host of our serverless September streams. This is now our third one. The first one we did an interview with Linda Nichols, Global Black Belt in App Innovations at Microsoft. The second one we talked a little bit about how you can do DevOps and serverless the right way with Liam Hampton, who is a fellow cloud developer advocate here at Microsoft as well. And today we're talking something a little personal, which is my own experience with serverless and a project that really kickstarted my career and whatnot. And yeah, lots to share. We do have another guest on for today, but we've got some technical difficulties, so we'll see how I can bring them on once they figure that stuff out. But at the moment, I've got some slides up on the screen. But before we get started, would love to hear a little bit more about everyone's experience with serverless, experience with Azure, experience with cloud. Are you trying to get into cloud? What interests you about this specific session? Jay says, checking in from Seattle. Love Functions and Cosmos DB. Functions and Cosmos DB, that is a fantastic combination right there. But alrighty, let's kickstart my presentation. And then like I mentioned, we have Rishab, who is a cloud developer evangelist at Twilio, who'll be joining us a little later. So hopefully we can figure that stuff out. But anyway, let's kickstart my part here because I'm actually pretty excited about this presentation and whatnot. So anyway, like I mentioned, this session is titled The Serverless Project That Got Me Promoted. If you do want to keep in touch with me to any capacity whatsoever, all my social links you can find there at aka.ms/made by GPS. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I recently had a TikTok go viral, which was quite the interesting experience here. Just started my GCP journey. Interesting. Fantastic. Watching live from Ghana. Very cool. Let me know where you're checking in from. At any point, if you have questions, please just let me know. So on the agenda for today's presentation is we're going to talk just a quick overview of what serverless is. Then we're going to jump straight into the problem that I was tasked with automating. Then I'm going to talk to you about the approach of how I sort of tried to figure things out and put a plan together, how to build the solution. Then we're actually going to talk about the plan. So step by step, all right, what do I need this solution to actually do? Then we're actually going to dive and look into the diagram of the actual solution that I built back then. This just for context, I was a system administrator. I had a bit of programming knowledge. I had a bit of scripting knowledge. I had some Azure experience from that same job, but nowhere was I sort of an experienced cloud engineer or anything like that. And this other bit of context that I want to add is, because whenever we talk about promotions, people tend to ask about salaries and people tend to ask about like role titles and sort of what kind of things you did to kind of make that jump. So I was a system administrator then. This is, let's say, back 4 or 5 years ago. I was probably making around 55K USD. And then after, a year or so of being in that role and with this project that we're going to step through today, I made my case to junior cloud engineer at 75,000 USD. So that promotion was quite a big jump and a very big impact for myself. And I think I learned some important lessons that I want to share, especially when you speak about making your case for a promotion. And then finally, since this was a couple of years ago, I've gained some knowledge, especially in the serverless area. So there's actually one major improvement that I would make to the solution if I were to rebuild it in 2022. And I invite you all, as we walk through this slide deck here, to kind of keep your eye out for what do you think you would change. And if anyone can guess the change correctly, I will applaud you. I don't have any prizes, but I will shout you out. But we're going to see that towards the end. All right. So let's kick things off with talking about what is serverless. What the heck is serverless? Also, I'd like to introduce you to that animal on screen. That animal's name is Bit. Bit is a raccoon who happens to be the mascot of all the Microsoft Azure cloud developer advocates. So you probably see a lot of this animal amongst our presentations and on our merch. I have actually a plushie that I forgot to bring here. But yes, Bit is fun, has a lot of designs. I enjoy using Bit in my presentations, makes talking about tech a lot more approachable and whatnot. So yes, anyway. So let's talk about the actual definition of serverless computing. And I got this from Microsoft Docs. I didn't invent this. You can see Docs logo there. So serverless computing enables developers to build applications faster by eliminating the need for them to manage infrastructure. Nowadays, if you talk to people who have been in the serverless space for years, they're going to say like, oh, this definition is a little too broad, a little too general. Like you aren't really talking about event driven and all these kinds of things, which yes, but for the level that we're aiming and for the goal that we're aiming for this session, I think this definition is appropriate. But what really is serverless? Because the most popular thing people tend to say when it comes to talking about this type of technology is like, but servers are still running your code, so the actual name serverless is sort of confusing, which I would agree. But hey, it's the internet. It's the age of social media. You need a clickbaity title. You need something that's catchy and whatnot, right? So serverless just rolls off the tongue nicely and whatnot. So serverless really just means server maintenance less to the developers who are working with these types of technologies, because that infrastructure, the provisioning and the managing of that is all going to be handled by the platform. And make note that I didn't put here Azure or AWS or Google or Alibaba or I don't know, there's a bunch of other clouds. If you know other clouds, put them in the chat. Because serverless is not platform specific. It's not something that can run just on Azure, just on AWS. Like, probably some of the most popular ones are Lambda by AWS. You have functions, obviously, by Azure, Microsoft Azure. And then we have, I think Google has Cloud Functions. And then there's now like serverless container services. You have container apps on Azure. You have, I can't remember the GCP one or the AWS one, but they all exist. But anyway, serverless is not cloud specific or platform specific, right? I guess it would be cloud specific, because you don't really have on-prem serverless, but it's not platform specific. Now, I did mention a couple of these services, like Lambda functions, Cloud Functions, and whatnot. And these are functions as a service, or FaaS, or FaaS. But FaaS is not the only type of service that you can find in this type of technologies. You can have serverless databases. I know Cosmos DB, someone mentioned Cosmos DB earlier today. Cosmos DB has now a serverless plan. Messaging, things like Event Grid also work perfectly with serverless in our serverless. Storage, if you use anything like blob containers, that's serverless storage as well, right? A lot of services that you're probably already using are considered serverless. So you could also consider yourself a serverless engineer if you're using some of these things at the moment. And finally, this last part, which I think is very important, especially to this specific presentation, is an entire application can be serverless or only a specific feature. So if you're trying to use Lambda or use functions or use Cloud Functions and whatnot in your existing workflows or workloads or your existing apps and website, you don't have to rebuild completely everything from scratch with one of these services. Like you can have a specific feature that will be developed on something with one of these services as well, right? As long as it is something that is short running, So it's not something that has to run for hours and hours every single day. And it's a very focused niche function and process, then that could be an ideal fit for something that you can develop with serverless as well here. Before I dive in here, let me see if our guest is available. Let's see if we can bring Rishab on. Hold on. Let's see. Let me add here. Hey, Rishab, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine. How about me?
Yes, I got you. We were having this
Okay.
issue with Rishab where we can only hear him on one side. Before I dive into the problem here, we're going to have Rishab as our co-host, and then we'll dive into his content a little bit after here. But Rishab, you want to do a quick 30-second introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I'm a developer evangelist here at Twilio. I
Yes,
recently
Twilio,
joined
yeah.
them. It's been it's been almost 4 months now. Getting to know the DevRel side of things, how developer advocacy works, and since Gwen is my best friend, who better to mentor me with advocacy. So yeah, I'm on the stream learning about serverless, just like all of you are here. And about the project, I kind of have a bit of context of this project, but today we'll see like a deep dive on the innovation behind it and why Gwen chose serverless as a solution. So yeah, excited about that.
I'd be curious, Rishab, if you know what changes I would do, like to the updated version. It's one big change, and I invite the chat to also think about this as we're talking through it. But I'll ask you later on before I show the updated diagram to see. But let's dive right back into this presentation. We'll have Rishab just hang out with us here. So anyway, so just for context, everyone, like I have the baby bit logo up here because put yourself in my shoes. Really want you to live this experience with me. I'm young into my career. I'm not really very confident in my skill set, but I'm excited, and I've got my manager that approaches me and says, like, when we have this process that we want you to build a solution end to end, he didn't say you have to use a specific service, you got to do it a specific way. I was kind of just tasked with this, right? So here, very grateful for the opportunity, excited, nervous, and things, right? So this is the context of this project, right? So let's talk a little bit about what the actual problem was that needed to be automated. So I had two colleagues that were spending their mornings manually submitting files to a website. And I've highlighted here words that I think are sort of key to this problem here. So they were spending their mornings manually submitting files to a website. And this combined 3 hours between both of them every single day and 6 days a week, because this is a process that needed to be done Monday through Saturday. This was in the energy industry. I don't know if anyone has any experience working with the energy industry, but they have all sorts of rules, limitations, very old processes as well, things that have to be submitted. It's weird because there's some stuff that has to be submitted like exactly 9:59 in the morning. And if it's 1 minute after, it's considered the next day, a bunch of different things. So if anyone has any experience in the industry, in the energy industry, let me know in the chat. But anyway, so the total was 18 hours of manual work a week, right? And I've actually got here a representation of my frustrated colleagues that, they just wanted to spend their time, this 18 hours of time that they have per week, doing things where they're actually working on the skill set that is specific to their role, and not just doing something that you could automate, something that was manual, something that was really sort of boring and whatnot, right? Wanted to spend their time more mindfully. And I think this is also important when we think about automation, because when we think automation, we think people lose their job. But if you work at the right place, you've got the right team around you, you've got the right management and leadership, they can turn that time that was saved into more mindful work for your team, which is what ended up happening in this process, which is great. But anyway, now let's talk a little bit about the approach. Again, still, young Gwen, early in career, still baby bit here. But through conversation, I sat down with the team who were actually doing this process, and I'd figure out, okay, there's some key facts here that makes me think that I should use a serverless approach here. So anyway, first of all, again, this is our team here sitting in a co-working environment. But anyway, first of all, the whole process I knew for each file to be submitted would take a few minutes. So it wasn't a long running. It wasn't something that needed to run for days or hours or anything like that. So from them getting the file to submitting it to this website, it was a couple of minutes. So that's a key fact there. Then I also knew that these files could be processed independently. So none of these files depended on each other. It was one file, uploads, submit, done, move on to the next file, which is important. I think there was at that point when I first created the solution from 50 to 60 files, but the goal was to have more and more files depending on more clients coming in and whatnot. But again, order didn't matter. They didn't have to be done together. They just had to be processed at some point. Important here too. Another key fact here that I found out was that each file had a username and a password that rotates each 90 days. So in order for whatever process that I was going to create, it needed to be able to securely access these credentials. And these credentials also needed to be in a place that we could, in a streamlined way, update them because they needed to be rotated every 90 days, right? So it was also important here. Then I knew that the files that actually get uploaded were generated by an existing system. And then these analysts, my colleagues, were downloading the files from the existing system manually. But I spoke to the lead engineer on that project, and then he essentially told me, like, yeah, we're just sort of generating them and not putting them anywhere. But if you gave me a place where you wanted them to go get saved, I could do that for you. So I was like, okay, cool. Key fact right there too. So I know I could get the files to get, once they were generated, to go somewhere where I needed them to go. Very, very important part is the website where we were actually uploading these files to had an API. So if you are a developer, you do any engineering work, you know APIs are important when it comes to automating and having systems communicate with each other. If it didn't have an API, we were probably looking at using like, what's that technology that you can, or that service that you can use to automate like clicks in a website? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, there is something. It's basically, you can crawl.
Yeah, something like that. But it would have made this process a lot more difficult. But the way that I found out that this website had an API, and again, we're thinking energy industry, was kind of frustrating because I had to email their support team, wait like, I don't know, a week to get a response back. And they emailed me back a 60-page PDF that was, to be fair, it had everything, but I had to literally go through the entire thing to get, you know, okay, you need to have this type of information in the headers. You need to like submit this type of information. Here's the URL and whatnot and things like that. Responses to expect and all that kind of stuff. So key fact here, the website had an API. Finally, I also knew that it was important that the website response itself was important because it needed to be, if it wasn't a success, the file needed to be processed again. But it was important that every single file get processed. And even if it was successful or not successful, that response was going to need to save somewhere because my colleagues were going to need to be able to see, okay, just to verify manual verification there, everything looks green. Perfect. Okay. So let's talk about this. Let's in steps. So I have this the key facts, and I'm like, okay, so now I understand the actual manual process. And when you're automating something, it's very important that you understand every single bit. So it's like, think about like when you're trying to change a light bulb. It's not like, oh, just change the light bulb. Like, no, it's like step one. Do you have, is it the light bulb the actual issue? Like turn the light on. Is the light working in other places? Okay, you figured out the light bulb. Do you have an actual spare light bulb? You don't want to go up to go change your light bulb and turns out you don't have a spare light bulb. Then you got to go to the store, right? So when you're thinking about automating a manual process, it's all about every single little step and everything that could go right and wrong and is expected and whatnot. All right, so let's talk about the steps here. So first of all, we know that we have to get the files to automatically go somewhere once they are made available by that existing system. And we know that for that requires the change in that existing system to be done by the team that handles that system. Awesome. Okay. Second step here is that I know that as soon as a file is in that place, we need to process it. The actual process, the steps and process is obtaining the file. Then we need to obtain the credential. Then we need to parse the XML because these files were XML data and that API was expecting XML. Then we needed to submit the XML with the correct credential to the API. If the API returned a successful response, we needed to archive the file because it's been processed. We don't need it anymore. And when you have like a hot storage versus archive storage, there's a significant price reduction in storage that you use just for archiving. So the more we can save money, the better. And if the API didn't return a success, we don't move the file. We have to leave it in the same place that it is so it can get processed again. Fantastic. Then we need to, regardless of what the response is, save the response somewhere, save the API response somewhere. And also I mentioned that we needed to be able to update credentials and we also needed to be able to see the actual responses. I like this comment, XML a horror. Yes, I'm more of a fan of JSON myself, but hey, XML exists a lot and is still very used in many, many places. But yes, it would have been so much easier to work with JSON, but yeah, we have XML there. So anyway, additional tools. We need to create a credential updater. Yes, of course, because we need to interact with this service that was going to share, was going to keep the credentials. And we needed to build some sort of static website that my colleagues could just visit and they go to the website and they see all the results and then easily see it's green, green, green. If there's something red, then, oh, they have an idea of what needs to get processed again. Maybe they kick off the automation process or whatever once more. Okay. So anyway, now we have all the steps and now we talk about the plan here. Again, still kind of like early on, not as confident, but we're going into it, right? So we got the plan. Now things are about to get, I'm warning you all, things are about to get chaotic. But that's sort of how it is when you're sort of like, you know, putting the process together, kind of figuring things out. You're kind of doing a brain dump. Things can get a little chaotic until like, you know, they smoothen out and you actually figure stuff out, right? But anyway, so again, let's map these steps into Azure services. So we need the files to go somewhere. Well, perfect solution for that would be blob storage. And like I mentioned, blob storage is essentially a serverless storage service with Azure. Okay, so I could give the blob storage the proper like SaaS or token or however it is that you want to your service to connect to. I know I think it was like a .NET application. So they were able to just get like, okay, these files are manually, these files are generated, we'll send them straight off to a blob container there in Azure Storage. Then I know that we need to process each file as they come in. Azure Functions is a perfect service for that. Azure Functions has a bunch of triggers and bindings. Triggers are ways that your event-driven code, which is what functions are, can execute, can run. And then blob trigger would mean that, okay, your function is expecting some sort of change in some sort of blob container, which the change in this case would be, oh yeah, a new file is available. Let's do something with it. So we're going to use functions to obtain the file, right? And then the next step here is to obtain the credential. Now I mentioned we have to have a safe place, safe, secure, top-notch security, where we can maintain our credential, but we also need it to be somewhere that we can update in somewhat of a streamlined way. For that, we have Key Vault. Key Vault has SDKs and APIs that you can use to securely interact and update with them, but also you can use an access policy within Azure to have your Azure Functions and Key Vault talk to each other. And when we're in the solution diagram, we'll see that there's a back and forth here. But for right now, let's think of like the pseudocode. Like before you actually code, you have pseudocode, right? So this is like pseudo diagram with cloud infrastructure and whatnot. Okay. So then parse XML. That was another job before the function itself, and we've got it here pointing to the function. Now, remember I told everyone there is one big change I would make in my updated solution if I were to rebuild this thing in 2022. I'm going to tell you, in this slide, you can probably get a feel for what it was, but pay attention. Okay, so anyway, then we've got to submit the XML with credential to the API, and again, regardless of the response, we need to save that too. And then we need to the actual submission of that data will be done from that function as well. Next, we've got to save the API response. We need to actually grab that data and put it somewhere. Table storage is probably like the cheapest and more straightforward way, and you can have an output binding on the Azure function to save to table storage. So perfect, like table storage, a couple of cents a month. We'll talk more about the actual finances of the solution later on. A couple cents a month. We don't need Cosmos DB. We don't need an Azure SQL database for this. Like, no, just simple table storage will do it for us. Finally, we need to create the additional tools, which would be a credential updater. Remember, we're going to have credentials in Key Vault, so we need to be able to rotate those every 90 days or so. So I built this. We're going to use a Python, I used a Python SDK to interact with Key Vault, and then we needed a static site to view the results. Remember that. Blazor. I don't know if anyone has experience with Blazor. I'm a big fan. Blazor allows you to use .NET technologies to develop full stack applications. You have Blazor WebAssembly, which runs off WebAssembly technology, and you're using .NET for just static websites. You have Blazor server side, which has a server and a front end. Very cool technology there. But anyway, yes, this is essentially steps in Azure, right? So again, everything's a little chaotic, but you might be able to get a feel for what changes I would have done. But anyway, we've got essentially all the services that we're going to work with here. Okay, so now at this point in my I guess experience or my time with this project, I've sat down with my colleagues. I've got all my key facts. I've approached the thing. I've planned it out, and I'm feeling more confident. So now we've graduated to a bit with a laptop and ready to work in Azure and whatnot. So we're going to dive into the solution, right? So for the solution itself, that first step is let's save the files. And remember, I mentioned that this is some sort of internal application that another engineer has built. So we need to get these files, these generated files, get saved to something. And I added a note there that says, it might be a little too small, but what it says is that these files are saved using a naming convention. And this is important for our next step that we have coming up here. But yeah, like I mentioned, we're going to use blob storage. So we have here processing blob storage, which are files that were manually downloaded are now going to go straight into blob storage. And blob storage, each file there is going to trigger an Azure function, right?
Quick question. So
yes,
the file that the internal application generates, do engineers put them manually in the blob storage?
No, it uses probably like blob storage API or probably SDK, like .NET SDK to just get the files to go straight into things. So that was automated as well. None of the process was manual unless there was manual verification or manual like resubmission needed to be done again. But that was a good question there. Okay, so yeah, we know that as soon as a file hits a blob storage, each file, not just like a group of files, each file, so we're talking about 50, 60 files, is going to trigger this process XML file here too. Now, remember that I said there was a naming convention. So the files were being saved, like, for example, I don't know, company name dash something .xml. That naming convention was important because that is what the function would grab the name of the file and then go to Key Vault. It's like, okay, Key Vault, return me the credential that matches this naming convention. So you see there's a two-way arrow here because Key Vault would return that credential to the Azure function. Now, the reason that the credential, sort of like the grabbing the credential is the first step here is because there's no point in processing the actual XML or the file if I can't find the proper credential, right? Because you're not going to be able to submit it to the API. So that's the first step here. So considering everything works out, we're like, okay, the Key Vault is returning now the credential back into the Azure function. And then the function has everything it needs to parse the XML and send it off to the submission website API. We're just calling it submission website. That's not the actual official name. So the function sends off that XML data with the credential and sends it off to the API, and the API will return some sort of response. Again, whether it's like successful or not successful response, we need to save the response somewhere. Next, that same function. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So the credentials were file specific, or were they required as headers for the submission website?
Yeah, they were required as headers. So we would parse the Key Vault has a key value pair, and we would grab those and send them off in the call to the API, and then we would send the XML data with the call as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like the payload, I guess. So then response, again, we're using table storage to keep the responses. Table storage is a very, very simple, like you think of a table in a database, very, very simple service compared to something like Cosmos DB or Azure SQL and whatnot. So the function will save the API response to the table. And then, of course, we talked about archiving files as well. The function would then archive the file if it was a success. So this is the diagram according to if it was a successful submission, of course. Now, pay attention to this. And I have like sort of this rectangle here that just kind of tells you what is built in Azure and what is sort of on-prem. So remember that internal service was deployed on a virtual machine that lived on-prem. And then we had everything that's inside the blue, which is indicating a resource group living inside of Azure. Right? So pay attention here to sort of what you think you would change or what you think needs to be changed. And this solution at 50, 60 files runs fine. But if you throw 1,000 files at this, if you throw several thousand, which obviously this company wanted to obtain more and more clients, and as more clients would onboard to their catalog, they would have more and more files, right? So their goal was to be able to process these files. You start to hear performance issues with this current solution if you get into the several thousands of files. But anyway, if anyone has an idea in the chat, let me know. But anyway. Now, it's not just the solution itself. I mentioned that I had also built a couple of helper tools. So the first thing was building essentially a CLI that would interact with a Key Vault using Python. So if you used the CLI before, it was essentially something that said username, like update. I don't know. I can't remember what my prefix was, but it was like update Key Vault. You would provide the username and it'd tell you, okay, what's the new password you want to do, and then it would go into Key Vault and update that correctly. Rishab, you want to take a guess? Yeah. Let me have you take a guess before I show you the updated one too. Okay, cool. So that was the first. This was great experience using Python, using SDKs with Azure. It was a very straightforward thing, but it was my first time using Python in a professional setting, so it was a lot of fun. And it was something like pretty easy to run too. And then the next thing was a static results website, which I was using Blazor WebAssembly on the front end. And every time you would hit, and it was deployed on app service, I believe, or maybe it was even deployed on blob storage, just like a static site. So every time you would hit the website URL, it would go call an HTTP triggered Azure function that would get the results of all the table and parse it to JSON and return JSON back to the site. And then the site was a very simple static site. It would say file name, success, file name, or whatever the response was, and the time that it was submitted, and whatnot. Someone says Azure Queue Storage. Okay, you're getting there. That's a good guess. I like that guess there. It's a good guess there. So anyway, now I want to talk a little bit just about making my case for promotion, because we work, we build, we upskill because essentially we want career advancement. We want more money. Like, there's nothing wrong in saying these kinds of things. But earlier, even before I was in this role, someone gave me some of the best advice that I've taken in my entire career, which is like, the people who promote you don't necessarily care about the tech itself, because the tech that you need to be able to work with will change, like, I don't know, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatnot. They care about how efficient you can be and how you can save them time and how you can save them money. So every time that I would try to approach a promotion, I would make sure I can talk in ways that, like, oh, what was the actual outcome of my project? It's not like, oh, I implemented containers or I implemented serverless or I automated something. It's like, what was the actual outcome? What was the actual impact? We see mic drop bit here. You see this is bit dropping a microphone.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I was very proud after this project, because I had been talking to my colleagues. They were like, we have so much time left. Like, this is all streamlined, that we know that this process is working, and all these kinds of things. So I was very confident. But there's a one line here. If I had to summarize this project, was my solution frees up 18 hours of manual work a week and runs for under $1 a month. Now, I don't really know what the salary of there was like, but if we, estimate that they were making, I don't know, $50 an hour. It averages about $1,000 a month. You're comparing $1,000 a month to a solution that runs under $1. To be exact, the solution was running for 30 cents a month. But I just put $1 because it's a little bit more catchier here. But for 30 cents. And the functions execution was free, because you have a grant, I think, per subscription with functions. I think it's monthly, of 1 million executions. So the compute is completely free. This was just storage. And if I was probably a little bit more clever with the storage, I could probably save, but 30 cents compared to $1,000 a month, massive difference. And then after this, I was promoted, and then I spent a whole another year as a junior cloud engineer at this company, and got a lot more hands-on Azure. And then years later, I'm here working at Microsoft. But anyway, let's dive into the fun part. I wanted to see, someone said either that or Service Bus. So Rishab, did you want to take a guess?
Yeah, I was gonna say some kind of queuing service.
Okay. Yes, queuing messaging. So when we think of distributed systems, which cloud is all about, like, the more distributed that you can make it, the more advantage you can take of different services in the cloud and whatnot. You're going to get the best bang for your buck and whatnot. So yes, we are talking about having a messaging service, and I would add another function, because that initial function was doing a little bit too much. So I would now abstract away the archiving, so the actual moving of the files and the saving of the response to table storage to another function. And that way that initial function can scale to process as many files as it needs to without hitting like any performance issues. So in this case, I have event grids. I think Azure has event grids. You've got, I can't remember. We have like 4 different messaging services. I know someone mentioned Service Bus, Queue Storage as well. But it really kind of depends on like what you're doing, like we're like aiming for. Queues versus events, and messages versus events and whatnot. Events tend to work a lot better with serverless and whatnot. So I would have event grid here, and then you can trigger an Azure function with event grid. So when there's a new event, and you can send like information with it. So file name and then response, and then that function would archive and then save response. I could probably do another function that, so it was just like one archives and one does the saving the response to table storage, but that was probably a little bit too overkill. But this would be the updated version of my solution. And if I actually implemented it in 2022, I do want to put together a series that actually builds this, and like maybe we'll do a month or whatnot. We lost Rishab, but anyway, going through actually building this out, because it's a very straightforward. Once you actually know what you have to automate and whatnot, it's a very straightforward process. But we'll see. We'll see how my planning for the next couple of months come out. But anyway, that is it for this presentation. We're going to have Rishab come up next. But of course, if you have absolutely any questions, ask them in the chat. I'm going to kind of move into being the co-host here. But if you want to stay in touch, you can follow me everywhere. My username on every single social media is made by GPS. And yeah, let me see. What happened, Rishab? There you go.
Yeah, I don't know. It just, like, I just dropped.
You got tired?
And then... No. I don't know what happened. Probably my network. But yeah, having all these sorts of issues with tech,
It's demo day. When it's demo day, it's like printers. Printers know that when you have to print something, they're not supposed to work. Yeah. But anyway, we've got about 20-ish minutes to tackle what you want to show us. I know Rishab mentioned he works at Twilio. Twilio has a bunch of ways that it can work with functions and different Azure services. So let's dive right in.
Yeah. I saw that someone mentioned they use Twilio with Azure Functions. So that's what I was going to talk about today, is our trigger that we have for Azure Functions, which will allow you to, have that SMS or voice capability using our APIs embedded into the Azure functions rather than, hacking a way of including Twilio into the Azure function, which I think is pretty good if you ask me, based on how easy the documentation is on Microsoft Learn. So yeah, if I can get my screen.
While you share that, I'm going to be dropping answers and links in the chat. Someone asked if I could share the Python. I don't really have the Python script or the actual file, but it's just using the Python SDK for Key Vault. So I will send that into the chat. You can go check that out. It kind of gives you a quick start on how you can get that going. Let me add your screen. There you go. I see VS Code. Is that what you're trying to share?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay. So yeah, a bit about myself. We talked about I'm a developer evangelist. I've worked with cloud, both AWS and Azure primarily. I spent a little over 4 months at Google Cloud too. So, cloud is really where we kind of shine. We also have a podcast where we talk about all the cloud technologies. So go check it out. It's called Random Cloud Chats. But yeah, I am guessing the audience is kind of aware of the dynamic duo we are here.
Cloud duo.
Yeah, the cloud duo. But yeah, let's get into the trigger itself. So I'll use the amazing extension that the team at Azure Functions have built, which lets us create a function locally. So we'll hit that, and you can see you must have a project open to create a function, which I don't. So we'll do create new project. And now, if I can get my personal files out of the way.
While you do that, so people get confused a little bit because you think a function app and then you think function. Because a function app can have multiple functions, but because those two are sort of the same word, it can get confusing. But right now what you're doing is creating a function app, and then you can create individual functions inside of that app itself. But yes.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah,
it's confusing, and especially when you're doing demos. Yeah.
So I just created a folder called demo. We'll pick Python since Gwen mentioned Python earlier, and I'm not an expert in C#, so we'll keep that out.
This is a good thing that you're showing here, because you have Python, you have JavaScript. I think you do PowerShell. You can have custom handlers, so you can use any language to use your functions as well. So we're not just .NET here.
No. And so you can see how you have all these different kind of triggers. I know Gwen talked about. I think your project included the blob storage trigger, right? The blob storage trigger, where if a file is uploaded, it'll trigger the function. And then the other one was the HTTP trigger, which was being used by the Blazor website, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's a bunch in here. Yeah. Event grids is the trigger that I mentioned I would use current day, but there's a bunch in here. A bunch of different options if you can get your events to kick your functions off.
Definitely. So I was the thing that I wanted to demo today was a bit more, complex, because I wanted it to be a timer trigger, and then it'll be using a pricing API that lists stocks and stuff, and it would have you can set the timer trigger by mentioning the cron, I think. So
the cron tab thing,
the cron tab thing. So what I was trying to build is a daily or a 12-hour update on the stock market, especially the stocks that I looked up to, so the ones that are in my watch list. But I ran into an issue with I think it was my local emulators, because when you debug, there's, I think, blob and queue service. There are a few emulators that need to be running on some ports, and for some reason they were not working, and I couldn't develop that. So we'll go with HTTP trigger, which is, I think, the simplest one.
While you fill this out, I have an idea of a project that I've been wanting to build that we could use Twilio with. I want to build a real-time subway tracker, just the subways that I care about. And then it can send me, like, if a subway is like a couple of minutes away, it can send me a text.
That
And
would
then
be cool.
also we would use like Azure Maps on the front. Like we'll have Blazor and then we'll have Azure Maps, so it actually shows the subway moving in real time. It'd be so sick.
That would be sick. Yeah.
But for another day, we have too many side projects going on. All right, so you've created the function.
Yep. So I've created the functions, and let me know if I need to zoom in. We have few files.
I think you're good. Chat, can you see
Let's
the
go
screen, or
one
should we
up.
do one more? Yeah, I think that's perfect there.
Okay. So we have few files that, the extension automatically generated for us, which is awesome again. So so this is the function. So the point that Gwen was mentioning earlier where, you saw that create Azure function, that was just the how do I say this? That was just a project where our code would exist, and this is the actual HTTP trigger function,
Yeah.
the Twilio HTTP.
Yeah. So
And then you have
the function app itself is like the host JSON, the local settings, and all like the additional files that the code needs to run. Yeah. The function itself would be the individual code.
yes.
Yeah.
So all of these settings are in here, but if we go and look at the init.py, which is our HTTP triggered function, we can see it's a boilerplate template of, if you run this, you'll get a response of pay. And if you pass in a queries with your name, it'll say, hello, Rishab, this is HTTP triggered function. Executed successfully. Otherwise, it'll say that, you can pass a name as a query. So that's basically what it's doing. Now, if we look at the Twilio trigger, or Twilio binding, sorry, my bad.
Bindings are
pull it up.
ways that your functions can interact with other services, whether that be pulling information in, which would be an input binding, or sending for information out, which is an output binding. Alongside all these triggers, you have storage, events, and whatnot. There's different services with different types of bindings, and then they're always developing more and improving more. Like I was recently looking at the Azure SQL one. There's no trigger for it yet because it's still in preview, but they have input and output bindings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got some documentation here. I love it.
Yes. So this is Microsoft Learn. And if you're, trying to explore Azure Functions, go check it out. Everything is in here, and you can see how many bindings they have. So you have triggers, and then you also have a lot of bindings available here. And then every language that, the Azure Functions are supported in, you would have a programming language example that you could use. So it did say that, create a function first, and then you can utilize this binding inside it. So the function.json is where all our settings related to the function are. So what we'll do is copy this over to our init.py demo here. And if we can go into function.json, you kind of see the function settings that we selected in the beginning, where the auth level, I set it to anonymous so that, everybody can kind of trigger it, and we don't have to worry about, only for the sake of this demo. Otherwise, I don't want people texting me. No. And then you have, as Gwen was mentioning, you could have out or in, depending on the logic of the business or the application logic. So we'll paste our settings here for the Twilio binding. You can see it's Twilio SMS. The name is Twilio message. You have some API key. So you have some authentication settings in here that will allow you to, authenticate to your Twilio account, since we'll be using Twilio's API. And the direction is out, which means it'll send, a message. So if we save that, go back to init.py, open up our documentation again, and if you look at it, it's pretty simple. So, and we'll go over it line by line, Question for chat. Do I sound sick?
You do sound a little sick. I was going to ask you off the air if you're all right. You've been traveling a lot. Maybe it's that.
Yeah. I know if some of you have been following me on Twitter or Instagram, there was a 2.5 hour delay, and I was super tired. I wanted to get home. I got home at 1 a.m. and I think that was just too rough for my body. But
But
yeah,
you're here putting in the effort for all of us to teach us Twilio and Azure Functions. So we appreciate you.
yeah. But if I sound weird, it's because my throat is acting up. So we are importing a bunch of stuff at the top. So we are using the JSON. Azure Functions is important because this is this is a
Yeah.
function. We have a function called main defined here, and you can see it's built because it's a HTTP triggered function. You can see HTTP request here. We are also using the Twilio message binding that we configured in function.json. And you can also see there is a function out, and that will be sent as a message here as a string. So you might be asking where that is. So if you look at body, here is the body that says, Azure function texting. We could name it as, serverless live stream says hello.
Perfect.
And if you go back, so you have body, you have two, and then you also have the Twilio message. So there are a couple of things that the Twilio library uses. One of them is, the message. You could also do, the one cool thing I found is you could create an API with Azure Functions and Twilio binding is a lookup app. So you could ask for a number in your API, have a HTTP triggered API created in Azure Functions, put phone number as a query, and then it'll give you if a number is valid with area code and country and who the carrier is.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that could be important if you're collecting numbers and kind of want to see if a phone number is valid or not.
Yeah.
But yeah. So there are a bunch of things. Again, I would refer to the documentation if you want to learn more about the binding itself. But basically, this just sends a message with whatever the message body we have in here. And also, it returns a success message saying message has been sent. Why are you both wearing caps? It's helpful to save codes in mind. I think I should try because I'm so poor.
I started wearing hats because I don't like how my hair looks, and then it sort of like became my thing. So I kind of kept doing it. But then I listened to this podcast that says that if you're wearing a hat and you have like headphones on and you get kind of like tunnel vision to your screen, it helps you focus. I totally think it's a placebo, but then ever since then I felt like I can focus more. So that's why I wear hats.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, me and Gwen, we both kind of have a thing for hats and sneakers. So
yeah, big time hat and sneaker fans. Anyway, back to the demo.
Yeah, so you might be wondering what I was doing while we were talking. So the API credentials that we need to talk to the Twilio API, we need to store them somewhere. And in order to develop this locally, you can store them in local.settings.json in your actual function app, not the HTTP trigger. I won't be displaying what my account SID and
You don't want to
token
expose your secrets to YouTube, Rishab?
Yeah, I don't feel safe. Especially since I have ample of credits in that account.
You don't want to share your credits to the world?
I can provide you with some credits if you want to test Twilio, but not my account. So we have the account SID, we have the auth token. I'll fill in those values once, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Of course.
Here's the number that we'll be sending a message to. What I'll say is I'll just save this as also an environment variable because I don't want to expose my personal number. So we'll call this, I don't know, 2 number. That sounds good.
Just remember what you're saying with the math.
Yeah. I've had sometimes I would be sitting on an issue and realize, I named the variables differently.
Or it's a capital or something like that,
Yeah.
or lowercase kind of. Oh my goodness. So
Okay.
frustrating.
So the functions.json look good. So we can save that. And now I'll take this away and put in my info.
Gonna configure it. Put in your info while I answer some questions here.
Sure.
So I like this that says have your subway tracker run on a Raspberry Pi and set it next to the front door. So I think what I was gonna do is, I have a Magic Miro project. It's on my channel. It's essentially a Raspberry Pi Magic Miro. It's a two-way Miro, and I had it indoor. I wanted to rebuild that here at my new apartment, and then have essentially like the tracker data in the Miro as well. So when I'm getting ready in the morning, I have a good feel for like with the subways and whatnot. So, but I like this idea too. I've seen really neat stuff with like working with like the MTA subway API and having it display in real time. So, and with Raspberry Pis, there's just so much potential there. But this is a fantastic idea. What up, Jay? The homie Jay is here. Hey, Jay, fellow senior cloud developer advocate, Python expert at Microsoft here. With the life hacks. It's more of a placebo. Let's not say life hacks. Jay also has a lot of content on Python and functions, so be sure to check that out. If you go to aka.ms/serverless-September, you can see our blog there. Here's another one. Let me know when you're ready. I don't want to take up all your time.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We've got here, what's the best language to learn if I'm getting into Azure? If you already know a language, I'm pretty sure that's going to be supported on Azure, despite popular belief, and we're trying our absolute best to overcome this. Azure is not just a .NET or C# specific platform. Like there's tons of other like focuses that we have. There's JavaScript. There's Rust. My friend Liam, colleague on our regional cloud advocate team, is working a lot to get better support and more awareness for Go on Azure. There's a bunch of different ones. So the one that you actually know, I'm pretty sure you can get it to work in Azure there. Java and whatnot. Marco says hi. Hey, everyone. Rishab, you might know what this is saying here. I think is that bro?
Just a sec. I'm trying to find my StreamYard window. Yes, that says, what the heck? Okay.
Here it says, I love those things. I think this is referring to the Magic Mirror?
The Raspberry. Oh, okay.
Raspberry Pi? Let's see. Last one here. Sorry, came late to the talk. So you're creating an API that can be called within a React API. So right now we're demoing how to use the Twilio binding with Azure Functions. He's just setting up environment variables because he doesn't want to get doxxed on live stream. But earlier today, I talked about a solution that I built that got me promoted and whatnot. You can watch the recording, and I'll make sure everything's available after that. Working on a new one for ADHD Awareness Month. That's awesome. So this is, I'm assuming this is like a blog post or something like that. That's cool. I will be checking it out once it's available. Here's this one's for you, Rishab. Probably could provide more info on the Twilio credits. I've tinkered a bit with their API on some IoT projects and would like to learn more. The cool thing about Twilio is I know you all are always doing like hackathons or projects where people can win credits or people can use credits for the projects and whatnot. So I would say keep up to date with that. Follow Rishab. I'm sure he'll be sharing those opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
you're ready?
I'm almost done. And this is the last one. So what did I name it? Should probably copy paste it. Okay. Think I am ready. I made a little change and I'll mention why. Okay. So you should be seeing my screen again.
Yep, CVS code.
Yeah, so I did an import for OS because here it said 2, and I mentioned the key factor. Like we were referring this to as from number, whereas this is to number. So this is where my number goes in. And I had to, again, as Gwen said, I don't want to get doxxed. So I'm using the OS environment variable, which again, you can store in local settings.json. And then here in the settings for the actual Twilio binding, it was from, so I had to, change it to from number. It wasn't a true to number.
Okay.
So from number is like you can buy it from Twilio, right? So I think it's $1 a month for a number. So that's where your from number goes in. And if we go back here and make sure all of our files are saved, open up the terminal. Okay, and do func, as in function, start. Okay, port 771 is unavailable.
you running it already?
Could be.
Or
Let me
did you
see
run it?
if I have other
You might have to
terminals
close VS Code.
open.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it again. I don't think I have any other terminals open. Okay, cool.
There you go.
So we have it running on localhost 7071/API/Twilio HTTP because that's what our HTTP trigger was named. If we click this, and we are seeing
What
some
do we
errors.
get? 2 phone numbers not currently reachable using the from phone number.
Okay.
Is it the plus?
No, you have to have the country code and the plus. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my actual number here, but I'll try to like hide
Put it
it.
off. Yeah.
And then we'll see if that solves. Because I don't think should be an issue.
Okay, cool. This is programming, y'all.
Yep.
You just debug in Google until something works. Let me see. Are there any must certifications for cloud engineering? I mean, I wouldn't say there's any requirements or musts, but I would absolutely say that if you wanted to learn, you want to get certifications, I think going for like an associate level and then a specialty or a professional is probably your best bet. But you don't have to like collect them all or study certifications every month or anything like that. No. I had the AWS certified developer when I got from like help desk to sysadmin, and after that I didn't really have much of a need to study for certs. I learned a lot more on the job, but it definitely did help landing like that first role. But it's not a requirement or something that you absolutely have to get. It's like if you learn through like guided learnings, certifications could be a great benefit to you. Did you figure it out?
Yeah, I'm doing a save now.
Ivana's here. Hey, Ivana. Thank you for hanging out. Let's see. Did I miss anything? I think someone asked me, what kind of issues were you facing without the event grid, please? Yeah. So essentially the issue with the original solution was it was just one function doing a couple of things. Remember earlier on the presentation, I mentioned that you need to have functions that are dedicated and focused and niche. So by having a queue service or a messaging service in between multiple functions, you can have handoffs and you can have that communication be a lot more straightforward. And then that individual function, since it's doing just one thing, can scale very well and just focus on that one thing. And then likewise, you have your other functions doing what they're supposed to be doing as well. All right, you got it?
Yeah. So the from number, instead of saving it in the variable, but I did realize what I did wrong. There was a space, and it didn't like that.
So it was something like that.
Because when I copied it from Twilio, this is how the number was, and this is not my personal number, so I'm okay sharing
Everyone texts Rishab now. Okay.
Well,
cool.
if we deploy the Azure function and if you start clicking the HTTP the URL, it'll start sending me message really. Okay, so if we click that, it opens this, and if you can't see, it says message sent. And if I check my cell phone here, if we keep clicking that, you can see it.
Yeah, we see
my
it.
camera will focus.
It's not focused, but we see. There we go. Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
That's the message that you put. Serverless live stream says hello. So I'm not gonna host.
Whoop! We lost you for a quick second. There you go. You're back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say, do you want me to host this on Azure and see how mad it gets?
No. I think we're good. I think so we've hit a couple of things here, and I think with very little configuration, essentially just pulling from the documentation of the binding and of functions, we could get this going. And it's that easy and that straightforward to get SMS integration with your like serverless projects and whatnot. Of course, you'll have to have credits and you'll have to have a number and you have to sign up for Twilio and all those kinds of things. But it's very doable, and like the documentation is a great way to get started. Do you have anything else you want to demo, or could we dive more into questions? We could do a couple more minutes. I don't know if are you Tight
Let
on
me see
time?
if I can pull up the phone lookup thing that I was talking about,
Okay.
which I think is good. But there is a good question that says, is Azure Functions like GCP Cloud Functions or GCP Cloud Run? So
Fantastic question.
Cloud Functions is what Azure Functions is.
Mhm.
Cloud Run is more like the serverless container apps.
Container apps.
Yes.
Here's another one. So you can use something like this if you want to get a text when a file is uploaded. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. And
That's
also,
exactly.
I could have also had like this type of integration for when there was not a successful response from the API in that project, and they could have just texted and I was like, "Hey, this one didn't work. Check it out." That would have been awesome as well. Let's see. Here's an interesting one as well while you pull that up. Any idea what free MS certs would be in MS Ignite? For those who are aware, Microsoft Ignite is a conference we do yearly as well. It's coming up next month. And usually around conferences, we like to do cloud skills challenges. We like to do sort of incentives to get people to study cloud and to learn cloud. And sometimes we give like 50% off vouchers. Sometimes we get free certifications. But we're always doing this. We always have, what are those daily boot camps?
Clouds.
They're called something day, but there's like
Virtual days.
virtual days where you spend a whole day studying and you take a certification, and the certification is included in that. So there's always opportunities. Like your best bet is probably to follow, obviously us on Twitter and whatnot, because I'm always retweeting this. I feel like every single week I find some way that there's different programs and events and so whatnot that are giving certifications away. Cloud Skills challenges are also a great way to do them. For Serverless September, we have one going on, so check that out as well. But I don't really know which ones. Like they don't tell me this information. They can't trust me with top secret information. Let's see here. I have to drop off. Thank you very much. I'll be following you. That's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the demo. Did you pull it up?
Yeah.
Where did you pull this up from? Did you have this?
Yeah. I have this.
Okay.
So you can see, just to quickly glance over the code, we have some imports at the top. Again, secrets saved as environment variables, saving me from getting doxxed. And then we're using the lookups. So this is a built-in function, which, the Twilio library has. And it basically fetches the carrier type and then returns it as a response saying that phone number is either valid. If it gets a response on the lookup that it's not valid, it'll just say invalid phone number, and then we are setting the status code to 400 since we're using this as an API. Else, there's also another else statement at the bottom. So if you don't pass a phone number, it'll just say you can pass a phone number using the query string. So I have it running right now, and if we open this Thunder client, which Gwen recommended, as
highly recommend that VS Code extension.
It's pretty good. So if we copy this URL where our HTTP function is running, paste it here. The parameter was phone underscore number, and I don't know. Let's put in my Twilio number since it's already public now.
It's gone. Privacy is gone.
Privacy is gone. Yeah.
Okay. Curious, where'd you got this? Did you get this example from?
This one?
Yeah.
This one is a blog post.
Oh, sweet, nice, love it. Look at that.
Yeah. So yeah, we could link the blog post down. I would just have to look it up. Okay, so I have my Twilio number here. So see how there are spaces. So this was what messed it up. Okay. So we have our GET request ready here. We'll hit send. So we get a status 200 OK, which means the API call was valid. It says phone number is valid, mobile country code is 311, mobile network code is 950, and the name is Twilio. SMS, it also knows what it's being used for. So yeah, that's how you can look up phone number.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. I was going to give you my number, but then I was like, no, I can't.
No.
This is cool. We'll be sure to link either in the chat or I'll later up in the recording. I'll have it in the description. We'll share it out on. You can tweet it on Twitter or whatnot. But yeah, we've covered a lot here. Do you have any other thing you want to demo? Because I know we're right about time. All right, cool. Let's switch to full screen here. Let's wrap up with some of these questions. Here's one here. Silly question for GCP functions. I can use serverless VPC connectors to connect to VMs in a VPC. What is the Azure equivalent? VPCs are like VNets?
Yes.
Okay, so I know Azure Functions on the consumption plan, which is the way to get like the most savings when it comes to serverless functions in Azure, doesn't have VNet integration. But if you use your premium plan and any kind of other plans, so like dedicated and whatnot, you can have VNet integration and you have options to do that. But that's the only caveat with Azure Functions, like you'll have to be on a premium or above plan. And the consumption plan, which is what I usually recommend people to start with, and you can get the majority of stuff done. There's no VNet integration there. But I would sort of challenge you to kind of figure out if there's other APIs or SDKs that can get what you're looking, or like bindings or triggers to get done like what you're looking to get done, instead of having to like immediately jump to a premium plan. So yeah, there's that. Okay, I think we've covered every question here. Any final words here, Rishab?
No, well, this was fun. Serverless September, I think we have been, Microsoft has been doing it for a while now. And Gwen has always been part of it. It's always fun to collaborate on stuff. And, it's a good month. Learn more about serverless, create some hacky apps here and there. So yeah, it's been fun.
I got to try that Twilio integration. We could do the Twilio integration with the crypto Blazor app that we did last year, remember?
Yeah, we could add
the real-time one. Yeah, that one's essentially built already. All right, cool. Anyway, so many ideas. Thank you all for hanging out. Be sure to keep up to date with us everywhere. And we'll see you in the next video session, whatever it is. We're always doing something. All right. Bye, everyone.
Peace.